Hi, friends. Thanks for joining me today on Dr. Mike Live. Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 17 through 19 says this: Now gird up your loins and arise and speak to them all which I command you. Do not be dismayed before them, or I will dismay you before them. Now behold, I have made you today as a fortified city and as a pillar of iron and as walls of bronze against the whole land, to the kings of Judah, to its princes, to its priests, and to the people of the land. They will fight against you, but they will not overcome you, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. Folks, we are in a war for righteousness in America, and this war will not be won by appeasement. It will not be won by compromise. It will be won by men and women who will bow the knee only to God our Father and will go forth in the power of the Holy Spirit of God. Having been redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ, we will win this fight. I'm pleased to welcome to the show today my good friend Mike Heath. He knows exactly what I've just said in this first minute or two because he has been in this war for decades. Mike's going to bring a perspective to the conversation today that's going to encourage you, brother and sister, to not just stay in the fight, but to actually engage your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends, your family with the gospel truth of Jesus Christ. That is our weapon for victory. Mike, thanks for joining me today on the show.
Dr. Mike, it's an honor to get to know you, as I have had the privilege over the last 6, 7, 8 months. And it's a great honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this date. We chatted a little bit this morning, as we always do on Mondays, and trying to develop a strategy, a game plan for moving forward. Now, Mike, I mentioned you've been in the so-called quote-unquote culture war for quite some time. Some of our folks might not be familiar with your background as I am. So I'm wondering, before we get started, if you'd just give a brief overview, a synopsis of who is Mike Heath, and what you were doing in Maine for all of those years, and what's brought you to this point today where you're at now.
You know, Dr. Mike, I'm blessed to have been raised by two loving parents, a mom and dad, who are still alive and are even now traveling on the roads from Florida to Maine. They retired. My dad's both of them are in their early 80s. And I'm so blessed that they're still with us, and it's always great to have time with them. And they raised me in the Methodist Church, so they introduced me to the Bible and to Jesus Christ at a very early age. And I did not, as I moved into my teen years, feel that I was interested in or even really close to the Bible or to Christianity. It was just sort of in the backdrop of my life. And what was in the foreground of my life was public school. So I was being indoctrinated in the 1970s, and television, of course, lots of television in those years for middle class Americans. And so I was being brainwashed and indoctrinated by these incredibly powerful instruments of communication and of education, of bringing to the human mind the ideas that become formative and remain with us for the rest of our life. So, and when I was 18, in my teen years, typical of Americans, got involved with things I shouldn't have gotten involved with. Not going to go into details, but because of being brought to church, Dr. Mike, knew that I was guilty. I knew and I felt that guilt, and I was concerned about God's opinion about how I was living. So I ended up falling in love with the woman who would become my wife. She was more dedicated to Christ than was I, more biblically literate than I was. And she introduced me to the Bible in a way that I had never really seen it before. I owned a Bible, but I hadn't really read it. I'd gone to Sunday school and I'd gone to church. And like I said, it was kind of a backdrop to my life. But for her, Polly Heath, my wife now of 37 years, the Bible and especially Jesus Christ was personal. This was very personal. So long story short, I deepened my commitment to Christ because of her witness. She took me to her church. One thing led to, I ended up being the leader of the Christian Civic League of Maine, century-old institution that even far left liberals respected up there as the, quote, conscience of Maine. I ended up as the executive director in my early 30s, and I examined the threats, the moral threats, after acquiring a degree in religion and philosophy from Roberts Wesleyan College, and decided that the place where this small institution could make the biggest difference was in helping the people of Maine think about the issue of adding sexual orientation to the Human Rights Act. This was in the 1990s, the early 1990s, and the homosexual movement got its start in Maine in the 1970s by removing the criminal penalties for sodomy from the law. They did that very quietly, and then they began their campaign to add sexual orientation to the Human Rights Act. And so when I became the executive director of the Christian Civic League in the early 1990s, it was abortion and homosexuality that was grabbing all the headlines, and it was on the front of Christian families, Christian men and women's minds with respect to a potential threat to the nation, to the state, to our sense of being a good country. And most people didn't think about it a lot, and certainly didn't understand it. It was that thing that nobody talked about, homosexuality at that time. So, but we saw, the Christian Civic League of Maine and I saw the threat that was coming, and we decided that the Roman Catholic Church was doing a yeoman's job of bringing the debate for life on the issue of euthanasia and abortion to the public, and helping them to think that through, helping them to come to the point where they respected human life and where they viewed abortion as an evil, as a moral wrong. Mm-hmm. We felt they were, and they had a lot of resources compared to us. And no, they were not addressing this issue. And they were the only other institution in Maine that we knew was capable of carrying our side of the debate on that issue. So the Christian Civic League of Maine, to its credit, the entire time that I was there, made this our top priority issue. Not that we didn't debate other issues, but we see, Dr. Mike, here we are in 2019, and I remember when my dad told me 30 years ago, "Oh, the abortion issue, that's just a wedge issue. That's going to go away. That'll go away." Mm. Have you noticed, Dr. Mike?
Yeah, it's not going away. It's getting more furious. But you know what, Mike? And pardon me for interrupting you. I think we're winning. I think we're winning this argument for life. What do you think?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Abortion's coming our way, but yeah. Sodomy, the debate over sodomy and sexual orientation is running away from us. It's like we haven't even started to fight. I feel like, but in Maine, we did fight. The Christian Civic League of Maine's board of directors every year from 1990, 91, every year until 2009, when I resigned, they voted, they debated, they decided this is tough, and toward the end we started to lose, but for 20 years we were winning, even though we were literally the only advocate for our position up there in a liberal state. We were a politically liberal state. We were winning, and we were winning against the odds, and we were winning because we were dedicating ourselves to the fight, Dr. Mike. And we started to lose when the pro-family forces became conflicted about whether we should reach out in love with a sort of counseling message, or whether we should stick with debating the policy aspect of it and the legal side of it and the more difficult political side of it, which is what I was doing. And then as time went on, Focus on the Family decided, we worked very closely with them. Dr. Dobson's a hero of mine. They decided to bring in, I can't remember the name of the campaign, but Love One Out or something like that. And the messaging shifted from what the Civic League was doing, which was hard-hitting and political and policy-oriented and somewhat confrontational. In retrospect, I wish we'd been a little more confrontational. But we were coming at it with politics in mind as the Christian Civic League of Maine. So Christianity first, civics second, and we gotta deal with this issue for the good of all the people of Maine, and we gotta make the right decision. And if you start talking about counseling and love and coming alongside folks who are confused or dealing with this issue, it's just going to muddy the waters and it's not going to help. And that was my view, but over time, the other view sort of came to prevail, and not just for that reason, but for a variety of reasons, we ultimately lost the battle, even though we were winning. And then once we lost the battle, ironically, Dr. Mike, we lost the battle that's being fought right now in the Congress. It's the question of whether sexual orientation should be added to anti-discrimination statutes. We defeated that multiple times in Maine, and we lost when the church lost its will to be political, and it became instead overly focused on the personal needs of folks who were trying to deal with this issue within their homes, loved ones who were being drawn to it. How do we respond to that very difficult situation? So the focus shifted to more of a psychological focus on the part of the church to a political focus. We have to maintain laws that bring judgment when it comes to sexuality. There is a right, Dr. Mike, and there's a wrong when it comes to sexuality. And the government has a duty to create those rules, to bring those rules to the fore in the society. It's the government's duty to create good rules regarding respecting marriage and family formation and the practice of sexuality in the society. It's the government plays a key role in that. Now, not the only role, of course. The church is also of fundamental importance. And so my role was to bridge those two worlds, right? I was the head of an institution called the Christian Civic League of Maine. So I had the duty before God and before all the people of Maine, all 1 million people of Maine, to bridge those two things, specifically on the issue of homosexuality and how we were going to deal with its presence in Maine. And so we lost when it became too psychological, when we started to have to talk about people's emotions and have to go down that road too much. Now, I think that's important, really important, but it has its place. And if it's not kept in its place, and if we lose sight of the critical importance of good laws and their impartial enforcement, which was one of the 3 founding purposes of the Christian Civic League of Maine. I love the 3 founding purposes from 1897 of the Christian Civic League of Maine. Elect honest and competent public officials. Can you think of anything better than that? To enact good laws and provide for their impartial enforcement. How about equal justice, folks? And lastly, to educate all the people of Maine in good citizenship.
Wow.
The Christian Civic League of Maine. And it's still in existence today. I love the institution. I hate how it's being led, because it isn't being led with no due respect to its current leaders. I'm sorry, but all of this niceness within the church has got to come to an end, and we have to get real, because Christianity is melting down all around us.
Yeah.
Where's the spine? Where's the meat of Christianity, Dr. Mike? And thank you for your book. And I'm sorry for monopolizing the time here, but thank you for your book. Make the pulpit great again.
Yeah, you're not monopolizing anything. You're the guest, Mike, and and I like to hear what the guest has to say. And so, one of the strategies of our government, and let me qualify what I'm about to say, Mike. I believe that our government falls outside of the God-ordained government of Romans 13. I make the argument as often as I can that the current government of the United States, and in fact, there's no government in the world that qualifies for obedience under Romans 13. So when Christians start throwing Romans 13 out there, I am quick to remind them, you need to read down through that, and what you'll find out is there isn't a government on the face of the earth, certainly not the United States federal government, that seeks to do good, to honor good, to reward good. Good, folks, as God defines good, not good as we determine what good is, but good as God defines good, and punishes evil as God defines evil. There's not the United States government certainly doesn't do that. If anything, they're very, very close to having completely turned that on its head. I don't think that's an overstatement. Do you, Mike?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that Romans 13 has been abused and used to silence people who know better. Not just Christians, but just people who know better.
Yes.
Abortion is not a complicated issue at all. It's not at all complicated. It is the taking of a human life, an independent human life with a unique set of DNA, chromosomes, whatever it is. I'm not a biologist, but it's its own entity from conception. And the resolution of the abortion issue is for men to be responsible. Nobody talks about this. It's always a woman's issue. The woman has the right to choose. Well, the man has a duty to choose. A duty before God to choose, to do the right thing with his body when he's with someone of the opposite sex. He has a duty to be responsible with his sexuality. And I believe, Dr. Mike, that it's the man who's going to answer for all this. It's the father.
Yes.
And we never talk about it.
You're absolutely right, Mike. We always throw that on the woman and say, well, if you weren't promiscuous, you weren't sleeping around, you should have thought about that before you had. Hey, what about the guy? Where's the man's responsibility to be a man and to do the right thing? Yeah, I agree with you completely, Mike, on that point.
And Dr. Mike, we, the United States of America, we are not going to emerge from this successfully, from this disaster that we've created for ourselves, which has now moved from confusion over sexual orientation to we can't even figure out gender now. I mean, gender is an issue of cognitive dissonance and of confusion, increasingly in our youth. This movement is so profoundly evil, this movement coming from the left, which promotes this promiscuity. It's diabolical. And the solution is simple. The solution is for, I don't know if you can hear that, I hope not. Can you hear that going on?
Yeah, that's all right.
Gotta get rid of it. Hold on.
That's the beauty of live shows, Mike.
I don't even know.
Let me tell you, when I knew that we were in serious, we being Christians in the church, I knew we were in serious trouble on this gender confusion issue. Oh, that's a new sound. Somebody's vacuuming the floor. You gotta love live. You gotta love live shows.
Live happens.
Live. That's right. I knew we were in trouble, though, Mike, when Martina Navratilova spoke up and said, men trying to be women have no business in women's sports, and she was shut down. She was shut down. I knew we were in trouble when that happened.
But I am so full of hope, Dr. Mike, that that there's a correction coming to this, because people are in the millions, I believe, looking at this and realizing how off the rails sexuality has become in the West. And I think that's what's fueling some of this nationalist populist the rise of nationalist populism throughout Europe and America, throughout the West. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. We certainly are looking at a disaster right now. I'm going to be appearing at a drag queen story hour. They're not inviting me to be there, but I'm going, in Waterville, Maine on June 1st. And there's a protest and a counter protest that's forming up over it. And we have got to, Dr. Mike, go to the streets with our convictions. It's not going to work to just sit on your Facebook page and push like buttons and think that you've helped. It doesn't hurt, obviously, but Facebook is a well, let's not go down that road.
Yeah, that's right. You know, one of the most powerful things that we can do too, Mike, and we being Calvary Chapel of Lima, this past Sunday, one of the most powerful things you can do is you can invite men or women who have escaped the darkness of lesbianism or homosexuality to come and stand in the pulpit and tell people the truth about what that is. The darkness, the despair, the depression, the suicide, the alcohol, drug, every kind of abuse imaginable, the satanic, demonic influence that is attached to that behavior, and tell it like it is from our pulpits. Tell the truth, because Christians need to be informed. If they're not being informed by their pastor on the reality of what homosexuality or lesbianism is, and they're not being informed in truthful terms, in real English language, then we are doing a disservice to the body of Christ. And so we had this past Sunday, yesterday, in fact, George Carneal was with us. George was raised in a pastor's home, a Southern Baptist pastor's home, and he went into homosexuality and lived that life for 25 years. By God's grace, he escaped that lifestyle, that death style, he calls it. He wrote a memoir, a book about it, From Queer to Christ, and came and shared with the body what it really is. And people were very receptive, because now they have information that they can share with their coworkers who ask questions about this. Well, how could you think it's wrong? Now they're equipped to speak intelligently about it. We've had David Arthur share from our pulpit before about transgenderism, and he's shared his heart. And I know David does that all over the country, but I think that's a powerful weapon, Mike, that pastors should be utilizing, bringing in people that have been redeemed from that and having them give their testimonies of hope, of restoration, that this can be overcome. What do you think?
I agree completely, but then what needs to be done with that information and the compassion that rises as a result of hearing these dramatic stories, like David Arthur's dramatic story. So glad to see him on the show today. I've known David for a number of years now, very proud of him, just produced a documentary. He's not letting anything stop him. His story needs to be heard by every single American. They need to know that this man is among us and that his story is true. And what needs to be done with the compassion that rises from hearing these stories and the understanding that we gain from from these parables, these modern day parables, is that we need to demand that our laws be fixed. We need to demand that our civilization, that our nation be restored to a place where everything, the neighborhood, the government, the church, the school, directs people toward the true, the good, and the beautiful. And when it comes to sexuality, that is it. It is so obvious, Dr. Mike, you don't have to be a Christian to understand that the good, the true, and the beautiful is best served by putting sexuality inside the bonds of a lifelong commitment. Why? Why is that practical? Not just biblical, not just Christian, not even religious. Why is it practical? It's practical because when human beings have sex, or even animals, there's a product, that something happens. There's an intentionality to it, and that is the creation of life. And so a new life is brought into the world, and everybody knows that the best outcome for a child is when they are with a mom and a dad who loves them for those formative years, who gives their time to them in love and with discipline, and brings them to adulthood, and then stays with them through adulthood as parents, mom and dad, together, while that child repeats the process and enters into sexuality in the context of this kind of commitment, what within Christianity we call a sacrament of marriage, or a covenant of marriage, which is for a lifetime. And just until recent decades, Dr. Mike, in civil law, the United States helped to sustain this this practice of sexuality and marriage and family formation over lifetimes through multiple generations by maintaining pretty strict rules for divorce. And those were, of course, undermined by so-called no-fault divorce, one of the worst things that ever happened to the United States of America. Of course there's fault, and the government has a duty to step in and to determine where the fault lies, and to bring judgment to that potential for a breakup of the smallest and most effective and most efficient and most important and most resilient economic unit that man can possibly create, and that's a mom, dad, and kids who are being responsible contributors to the neighborhood, to the community, to the civilization.
Yes.
The government and law, Dr. Mike, must be written properly, or else the civilization dies. You know, according to Paul Harvey, the average lifetime of a superpower is about 150 years, where it stays together. And after that, it becomes, if it's a good government, then the prosperity makes us fat and lazy, and then we end up losing it and we crumble from within. We watched that on Coach Dave's show this morning. And none of these really successful civilizations like Rome and China, etc., were conquered from without. It wasn't armies that conquered them. They collapsed from within.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's what's happening to us. And it's happening to us because of these sexual rules, because we're getting the rules wrong. We're not being practical about the rules, about the laws, about the expectations. We're not creating reasonable cultural and civil rules related to family formation and sexuality. And this is of critical importance. This is why, Dr. Mike, Donald Trump is putting, he needs to stop playing with this issue, the homosexual issue. He's being political with it. He thinks he can, and it's the church's fault. It's Christianity's fault. We're not being clear about what the gospel teaches. We're not being clear about what the moral law is according to the Old and New Testaments of the Bible. We're not being clear about what Western civilization has practiced and learned over 4 millennia, but especially over 2 millennia with respect to the contribution of Christianity to Western civilization. We're not being clear. And so you get a man's man, like a businessman like Donald Trump, and he's always thinking politically. He's always calculating. He's a very shrewd politician and strategist, and he thinks he can give us abortion, and he can play footsie with the gay issue and get away with it.
So the church needs to step up, is your point.
The church needs to make it clear to Donald Trump that he has to stop doing this. Just like the laity of the Roman Catholic Church is rising up and saying to the priest, bishop, cardinal, and pope element of their church, the religious in their church, the laity is rising up and saying, you got to stop being confusing about sexuality. You got to stop this. And we want to know why this is happening. We want to know why you're doing this. They're rising up and they're saying it. Evangelicalism. I mean, there's blood on the walls, Dr. Mike. You know this because you've interviewed some of the warriors in this fight that's breaking out within evangelicalism. There's blood on the walls within the Southern Baptist Church right now, metaphorically speaking. And it's over this issue. Our leadership has a duty before God, especially our Christian leadership, to be clear and concise about what the gospel, the New Testament, the Old Testament teach about marriage and divorce and sexuality and contraception and human life compared to animal life, right? I mean, we're all confused about the value of life. It's like a dog has equal value to a human baby. Come on. No, there's a hierarchy, right? Animals. We eat animals. It's okay to eat animals. Not okay to eat babies.
That's right. Yeah. We're gonna take some questions now, Mike. We're at the bottom of the hour, so Kathy, if there are any questions out there, but before we do that, Mike, Jared, let's put up Mike's website, michaelheath.org. If you're interested in following Mike, he puts out a morning email Monday through Friday. And there's the website, michaelheath.org. But Mike, you also do a live show now, and that's Monday through Friday. And listen, this is for you early risers, or maybe you third shift folks that are just getting off. 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Mike Heath live. And where can they go to Mike Heath? They can go to michaelheath.org and tune in there, right, Mike?
Yeah, Jared's clicking through there. He's pulling up the Mike Heath live page. So that's this morning's show. Just started this 3 weeks ago. I'm really honored to work with my son, Jared. He's got a company called Alpha Tech, and he strives to keep Christian voices on the internet that are being, especially those that are being censored. We are very strong advocates. I am, my wife is, my son Jared is through his computer company, for the right of people to speak their minds freely. And we're especially concerned that Christians be free to speak the gospel and speak truth to power. And so he does that through his company, and I'm helping him. And part of what I'm doing is learning how to produce live streams, because he does a number of live streams. He's actually producing this show and works with you on that. So I'm teaching myself by being my own host. So I started 3 weeks ago, and it's a lot of fun. It's pretty complicated software behind the scenes, but those are some of the shows that I've produced. And there's bad audio, and there's a lot of there's a lot of mistakes in them because I'm learning as I go. But that's at 6 a.m. Mike Heath Live. Would love to have you. You can come into the Hangout and talk with me, and we can discuss these matters. Also, Jared's back to the homepage. Jared, if you would go over to the marriage battle there, marriage battle link, and just left click on that. Just hover over that for a minute, if you would. Hover over marriage battle. So here is it's perhaps the most important material on my website. My friend Fritz wrote for me when I was toward the end of my years at the Christian Civic League of Maine, became a dear friend. He passed from brain cancer in the fall. but he wrote these essays on what happened with marriage in Maine. It's a sad and sordid tale of how we weakened and we ultimately lost the fight. So I commend to your consideration those excellent essays. He's poetic in how he writes, and you'll find them very helpful. And then moving over to the right on that menu, Dr. Mike, the live streams, I just hover over that. There's my show, and then also the Northern Mainland Man. This man is Roger Eck. He's the Bard of Northern Maine, and he calls himself the Northern Mainland Man. He's 85. He was married for almost 60 years. His wife passed a couple years ago. By the way, my wife reminded me that my parents have been married for 59 years.
Wow.
She texted me. She told me to stop scowling. So
praise the Lord.
Try to smile while I'm talking. I love you, honey. So she's texting me over here on the left-hand screen. So the Northern Mainland Man, I'm producing that show too to teach myself, and I've only managed to get one of them out without the computer crashing. For some reason, the computer keeps crashing when I do Roger's show. But I want to tell you, this guy is worth listening to because he's a war hero from Vietnam. He was known as the gentleman flyer of the Delta, and he flew helicopters for the Sea Wolves, and he flew over 500 missions
wow.
as the driver, the pilot of gunships in the Mekong Delta as a member of the Sea Wolves team for I think the Navy. So he's a great guy, great sense of humor too, very witty, in his mid-80s. So it's really my honor to help him out. And then moving over here, I want to talk about the Iceman. Just click on that if you would. This is Terry Hughes. Years ago, I used to think that this guy was off his rocker because here it's coming up. So who's the Iceman? This is Terry Hughes. He was a glaciologist, but he was with the Operation Rescue folks, and he was early in confronting the abortion issue on the streets with the truth sign, the signs that are very truthful that show that what happens to these babies who are, some of these babies, especially late-term babies who are aborted with saline abortions. Like scroll down. This is a saline abortion. This is Malachi. If Jared would scroll down a little bit. This is Malachi, saline abortion, the head's ripped off, the legs are ripped off. I stand proudly on the streets with this in honor of Malachi. He can't speak for himself, so I'm going to speak for him. And this has got to be ended. And this is the Iceman, Terry Hughes. And I published his autobiography. If you keep scrolling down, he passed from cancer last year. And if you scroll down just a little, whoops, there it is. Jared clicked on it. This is the Iceman. It's a 1,000-page autobiography that he wrote. And you can read it for free on your smartphone or on your computer. And he's a really, really fine writer, and just a great. I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to get to know Terry Hughes. So I hand out little cards. I don't have one with me that say that I stand mourning the murder of 70 million babies or whatever, and I give it to people, and then I link to this webpage. The business card does. And when we're on the streets, we're going to be on the streets tomorrow, my wife and me, with the Malachi sign in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I give out those cards and encourage people to go learn more about Terry's life and witness. So moving back to the menu, I'm going to finish this up really fast because you may have some questions. Matrimony Day, God's Way, we're going to be on the steps of the Supreme Court for the 4th time in 4 years. It was 4 years ago that the United States Supreme Court, with its Obergefell decision, just erased civil marriage from the United States, and has gone on. Of course, we've gone on as the United States, and we're pushing this this perversion of marriage called same-sex marriage on the whole world. And so every year on Dr. Mike, June 26th. Is the day that the Obergefell decision was issued. It's also it's my wedding anniversary. So every year on my wedding anniversary, Holly and I are dedicated to going to the steps of the Supreme Court to stand for marriage. So this is what we're doing this year. You can read all about it on my website, and hopefully you'll sign up and participate. You can participate with us on the Supreme Court steps. We'd love to have you come. Coach Dave is coming. We're going to renew our vows, Coach Dave and Michelle. And we hope others will join us, but you can join us from home. We're encouraging people to live stream and to post on that day on their social networks. And we need to push back. We need to tell the truth by the tens of millions throughout the world to bring goodness, truth, and beauty, to continue to bring goodness, truth, and beauty to the people of the world. So scroll up a little bit, Jared, and let me see what else I'm missing here. So my email archive, I publish that, Dr. Mike, 7 days a week now. Every morning it comes out at 6 a.m. So there's there those are. And you don't want to read these unless you have a thick stomach lining, because these are provocative and hard-hitting from a religious and a political perspective. And I think if Martin Luther could get away with it when he was taking on the Pope in the Roman Catholic Church, we should be able to get away with it. And if the left wing of politics can get away with it from the perch that they're on, this high perch of great power that they're on, attacking and undermining and propagandizing and brainwashing and suing and censoring and deplatforming and depersoning, then we peons can be pointed and personal in our rhetoric. In fact, we have a duty to be pointed and personal in our rhetoric, because people need laws and governments don't repent, people do. Right. People have to feel the result, the consequences of what they're doing and of what they're saying and of how they're leading. And that's not going to happen unless we tell them the truth. It's not going to happen. So I'll stop there with regard to my website. Yeah, Michael,
go there. Well, let's not forget, if you want to support Mike's ministry, there is a donate button up there.
Yes, sir.
So you can click on the donate button, and that'll take you to the form. It is a secure form, and you can support Mike's ministry there. And I know that he would appreciate that very much, and I would appreciate you doing that as well. So, and let's also let's go to questions. Yeah, let's do that now. Kathy, are there any questions out there that anybody has?
I have one from Brian on Facebook. He wants to know from Mike, what are some prayer requests that you have so us prayer warriors can take it to the Lord?
I left FedEx about 3 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago. I was delivering packages for FedEx, and sort of, to quote Coach Dave, I've been sort of sucking my thumb, and that's a long story. But I'm punching now. I'm punching, and you'll see that if you go to my website. And because I have 6 grandchildren, and I realize that if I don't get back into the battle the way I was in the battle, I'm not doing my duty to God and to my nation. And so my income is an issue. That's my biggest source of stress. My goal for this year, total for all ministry, personal, $70,000. That's it. We don't have any health insurance. We use one of the Christian things, no retirement built into that. It's just bare bones. So pray that God meets our financial needs this year, and that would be so very much appreciated. I have never been a money guy. I try hard not to worry about it. I try not to value things based on money. But it's how we eat, it's how we put gas in the car, those kinds of things. So really appreciate you praying for Polly and me with respect to that. I also want to say everybody needs to check out pauliheath.com, Paul, just like the Apostle Paul, I.E., Paulie, Heath.com, pauliheath.com. It's a great website. It's much prettier than mine because my wife is much prettier than I am. And she's also very, very much focused on the beautiful than I. I'm just moving, fast. Always not a detail guy, but my wife's website is gorgeous, and there's music there for you to listen to. And she's written and produced over 50 songs. and I know they'll be an inspiration to you. Take time to go listen to them.
Yes. Amen. Any other questions, Kathy, from social media?
I don't see any out there, Mike.
Okay. Anybody in the queue have a comment that or a question that you'd like to ask? Unmute yourself if you do.
I guess I've just explained.
I guess you must have explained it so well, Mike, that so okay, so back to our conversation, Mike. Well, one of the things that's important for Christians to do, and you mentioned this, and so I'd like to pursue this line of thinking and conversation, is that they need to become active, and it needs to start in their communities. So when we're talking about becoming active, we're talking about as you so pointedly put it, more than just liking posts on Facebook. Becoming active in this battle, and I term it or define it this way, Mike. This is a battle for righteousness. We're supposed to be living a righteous life ourselves, and then modeling that for other people, and leading the way, shining the light, so that they understand who Christ is through observing our lives. And you can't do that if you're not out in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
Accurate?
Yes, and we need to bring the truth, the antiseptic of the truth, and light into, first of all, into our own hearts, and we need to examine our own conduct, our own thinking with respect, especially to money and materialism, because the United States is very much wayward because our souls are so brittle and dry as a result of us valuing everything based upon money and material things.
Mm-hmm.
And this has gotten us to the point where our debt is where our national debt is where it's at, and our personal debt, and often in many cases in families and with individuals, is out of control. So start there. Start in your own home. Start by getting control of your attitude toward money and things, and then as you get control of your attitude toward, your thinking toward, your relationship with money and things, then you can really drill down and focus on what God needs for you and wants for you to do to love your neighbor. The greatest commandment, Jesus said, is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And you're not going to get there if you don't first deal with your thinking and your conduct and your actions with respect to value and money. Money does not tell you whether something is valuable or not. It's merely it's merely a means of exchange. Yes. The really valuable things in your life, and you know it, are it's not that they're free. They do cost you time. Love costs time. It costs energy, but it doesn't cost money. Love, the true and the good and the beautiful things in our lives are the most valuable, and they aren't valued by money or by material things. And so once you get through that, you can begin to God will show you, the Holy Spirit will show you how you can bring justice, bring righteousness into into yourself, into your family, into your community. And one of the things I'm doing, Dr. Mike, is I have this connection in Maine because of what I did for the Christian Civic League, which makes it possible for me to go after, so to speak, the governor of Maine and compare her to the biblical character Jezebel. Her name is Janet Mills. She's a hard leftist, and to go after her and to compare her to Jezebel and to do a play, sort of a Trumpian political move on her last name of kills, Janet Mills kills. And so we've launched a crusade called The Kills of Mills Crusade, the Kills of Mills Crusade. Because right now in Maine, they're passing a taxpayer funding bill on abortion, and they're passing a bill to make it illegal for people to get counseling for their confused loved ones who are getting caught up in this gender dysphoria problem, and a number of other things. And these are measures from the left that are killing our families, that are killing the good, the true, and the beautiful in our lives and in our families and in our neighborhoods and in our communities. So the Kills of Mills. And crusade, we're calling it a crusade because there's so much misunderstanding out there, Dr. Mike, on the crusades of the Gauls of France. That's where it all started in about 1200 AD, the crusades. And for about 400 years from the time of Muhammad up until that time, the Muslims, Islam, which is militant, was on the offense, moving to the west from where it was formed in Saudi Arabia. It was moving to the west, and it was doing so militantly. And it was getting closer and closer and closer to what's now France, where the Gauls live. And that was a center of strength for Christianity in 1200. And they felt threatened in their homes, and they also felt a duty with respect to Jerusalem and the Holy Land. And so they launched a crusade, and they went there and I'm not saying all the bloodletting and stuff. I'm not trying to justify all the bloodletting, but what I'm saying is we have to understand the Crusades in their context. There was 300 to 400 years of offense from Islam, of threatening militant offense, battles, warfare against the Christian West. And the Crusades responding to that lasted a very short period of time, comparatively speaking. And the militant offensive nature of Islam continues to this day. And if you don't believe me, then you need to watch the video that's 20 minutes long on YouTube from Saturday at Tommy Robinson's political rally. Tommy Robinson is from Luton in England, a fairly large city. Many Muslims have been moved in there by the globalists who believe in multiculturalism and who believe that we can avoid another war, we can avoid World War III by diluting all of the Western nations. The Western nations have too much of the power in the world, and so they have to be diluted with people from the Islamic world, from Africa, from South America, from Central America. These Western nations in Europe and the United States, they have to be, we have to become multicultural. We have to become one world. And Dr. Mike, it isn't working. And conflict is breaking out in an unbelievable way. And it happened on Saturday. And what we saw on display Saturday was black-clad Muslim youth, men, numbering about 100, escorted by the police for miles across Oldham, England, to the site of a Tommy Robinson political meeting, rally, outdoors, where there were women and children and potential and voters who Tommy Robinson was talking to, because there's an election on Thursday. And he had purposely selected a site that was a long ways away from where the Muslims are centered, where they live within that city of Oldham. He purposely stayed away. And the police escorted this group of Pakistani Muslims, and violence broke out. They threw bricks, they threw scissors, they were violent, they were beating on Tommy's supporters. It's all on video, I'm not making this up. And the police, after escorting there, tried to keep things separated, but not really. And so it's still happening today. So why does, and the media there is trying to say that Tommy Robinson is the provocateur. Let me just quickly say that Tommy Robinson's history is that he was in Luton. He's sort of an Irish street fighter type, and he saw that there were rape gangs forming in his hometown. And so he would physically go to where the Muslims lived, and he would challenge them on this issue of people being raped, women being raped in his hometown, and they put him in the hospital. He got into some scraps, and he would end up in the hospital. This caused his brain to kick in. So first he was responding with his fists, and then he started thinking about it. Then he wrote a book, and it was very critical of Islam as an ideology or religion, call it whatever you will. The book was critical of it, but it was a book, and he didn't call for violence in the book. He was just saying, this is Islam as I see it. This is my opinion on Islam. He wrote it. Now, the story is remarkable. And if he wins on Thursday, that's going to be another sign that the globalist forces of the West are losing their grip on the people of the West. And this must happen, or I mean, we're starting to live in an Orwellian dystopia right now with what's being done on the internet, and it cannot be allowed to become fixed this way. It can't happen.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with that, Mike. And we were talking before we went on the air. This is going to be a real litmus test of how much control. Now, there's probably someone out there, Mike, that'll say, well, if Robinson wins, it's because the globalists wanted him to win. No, I can tell you for a fact they don't want him to win. They're not controlling him. And I know people with the tinfoil hats on 24/7, I know what they think and the positions that they take. If Tommy Robinson wins, that is going to be a shot right across the bow to the people that are trying to manipulate and control the UK to keep it in the European Union when the people have already expressed their opinion, not once, but several times. And the politicians in the UK are trying to force the issue. Anyway, if Tommy Robinson wins, you're absolutely right, Mike. I think that's going to be a terrific sign for the UK and for other populist movements across the globe. Mike, we've only got a couple of minutes left. What would you like the folks to know primarily going forward in the next 60 seconds? michaelheath.org. Go there, live show, 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. If you want to get on the email list to get those emails, they're 7 days a week now, folks. Encouraging emails, sign up on the website. Anything else, Mike?
Support Dr. Mike Live. His budget for this year target by the end of December is just $30,000. A big chunk of that is for the conference that he's doing, the excellent conference that Dr. Mike is doing in late July. If you haven't checked that out, you need to. That's goyetherefore.com. Is that right?
GoThereforeConference.com. GoThereforeConference.com. Yeah, so tickets, you can get your tickets there. Thank you, Mike. Buy your tickets there. $59 Friday, Saturday, and we'll wrap it up Sunday at church. I don't know if I'll be speaking there. Right now, I don't even have a time slot. We've got so many people speaking, I don't even have a slot to speak. So you won't want to miss this conference, folks. If you'd like to support Dr. Mike Live, Jared already had it up there. You can go there and donate. I'd appreciate that if you have the bandwidth and capacity. Listen, all of this costs